Hi everybody, it's me, Mel. Welcome to the studio. I'm excited to have you here. So today we are hanging with my Gnomies for Halloween. How cute are these guys, right? You can create endless numbers of costumes and costumizations to your elves. So I hope that you have a lot of fun painting them today. I'm going to try to keep it fun and light and as simple and easy as possible. First recommendation I'm going to make is get all of your materials together. If you ordered the all-in-one kits from me, go ahead and get those together. In addition to what's in your kit, you're going to need a jar of water so that you can rinse your paintbrushes. You're going to want a paper towel, or I just use an old wash rag. It lasts forever. And I'm going to use a paper plate as my paint palette today, just to make life easy. I always recommend protecting the surface that you're painting on. My stuff is taped to the wall today so that we can get a good view on it, but you're not going to be taping your canvas to the wall. So use an easel if you've got one. I've used 2-liter bottles of soda as an easel. Just angle your canvas up against there. Make sure you protect your surface though. So spread out the butcher paper your kit came with, or use some newspaper. Just make sure that you're protecting the counter. And on that note, make sure that you're dressed appropriately. Don't wear your good clothes, because if you're worried about your sleeve getting paint on it, you're not going to have as much fun. So get your stuff set up. Make sure to grab some scissors. We're going to need those to cut open our paint packets. I'll show you how to do that when we get back. But get your stuff arranged. Grab a drink, grab a snack, turn on some music, cue up your favorite podcast, whatever it is you're going to do, and I'll meet you right back here. All right, so today I am actually painting on canvas paper. I am accumulating a massive number of paintings in my studio from creating them and all of these classes. So I decided to downsize it a little bit. I've got my originals, I'll keep them, but today's lesson's going on some canvas paper, which if you've never used, it's pretty inexpensive. It comes in a tablet like a legal pad. And it's a great surface area for practicing. I'll try to pick some up and throw it in the shop for you guys. But let's talk about what we're going to do here. Like I said, you can use a pencil or a piece of chalk to sketch out your gnomes. I'm going to use some yellow paint, so I'm going to load that up on my paint palette here. I have an open yellow paint, but I want to show you how to open this. Just take your paint packet, and you're just going to give it a little snip right there. And that's going to open up that end. And I'm going to start off with just a tiny dot, maybe the size of a pea. I don't need a lot. I'm just going to use it to sketch out the shape of my gnomes. And I can probably do all 3 of them with this much. So the way that it's going to work is I'm going to point to the original, and we'll talk about what part of the painting it is that we're going to work on. And then I'm going to explain to you how to do it. I'll tell you what brush to use, what color to use, where to put it, and I'm going to demonstrate everything right here on my canvas for you. Remember that you can pause at any time. So if you're just getting a little hung up and you want to work on your details, push the pause button. I'll be here when you get back. I'm not going anywhere. All right, here we go. I'm going to start in the middle, just because that's a little bit easier to get in frame. And what I'm going to start with are the noses all the way across. So I'm going to point out first that it doesn't matter what size canvas or board or paper you're using. The nose is in the middle, between the top and the bottom and the left and the right side. And it's about a little more than a quarter, a little less than a third of the width of the canvas. And let me show you what I'm talking about. If I take my hand and line it up there, it's about 4.5 fingers. We'll throw in the thumb just for fun, okay? So I'm going to mark that spot. If I move over here, a hand fits, and over here, a hand fits. So about a third of the canvas. And it doesn't have to be anatomically correct. It doesn't have to be perfectly proportionate. It's a gnome. So we just want to make it about a third of the width of our center space there. So I'm going to get a little bit of water on my bristles, and I'm moving it over to the edge of the yellow. That little bit I got. And I want to add enough water for this to become almost like a watercolor, really translucent and very light. You can see it's starting to drip just a little bit. That's good enough for me. Wipe off any excess. So we decided it's in the middle. I'm going to find the middle of my canvas, And I'm going to eyeball here about the middle third. So my fingers, little horns here, are going to be about as wide as my nose. So I'm just going to sketch in an oval. And I'm going to repaint this, so I'm not going to get hung up on the details. Just an oval right there. And I'm realizing that might be a little hard for you to see. So let's see if I can use a piece of chalk. That'll make it a little easier for you to see. Can you see that? I'm going to use this pink chalk. I didn't include chalk in your kit because I usually just have white. And white on white doesn't work so well, but we'll try this little pink chalk. Again, use your yellow, your watered down yellow paint. You can see it. That's what matters. All right, so let me get a nose in on each of these. So again, halfway between the top and bottom, left and right, and we're taking up approximately the center third. Now I'm going to do all three. So you should be done with one by now, right? If you're not, that's okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start building up the shape of the hat. Now, I start off by creating basic shapes like triangles here. So the first thing I'm going to do, we can see it comes almost edge to edge. Some of them are on a little bit of an angle or have a curve. For now, we're just going to take a straight line across. All we're trying to do is sort of hold space and block it out. We'll get down to the dirty details in a little bit. So I'm going to come right across the top of the nose, almost edge to edge with a line. So right across the top of the nose, almost edge to edge, all the way across. There we go. Good. This way, if you guys are painting all three together, there are three of you, nobody has to wait too long. And then I'm going to create the hat. Now, there are a couple of subtle differences in these hats. First of all, the mummy and the ghost, their hats are a little bit more like poop emojis, for lack of a better description. The witch's hat gets a little bit more tapered and narrow. Had to pause for a moment and darken up that paint because I could see in the monitor that you really couldn't see the shapes here. I want to make sure you can see it because if you're struggling, you're stressing, and it's not as fun. So I added a little red and made some orange because I can handle that. It's not going to mess with my paint too much. Keep using your yellow or your chalk. I just need mine to be a little darker so you can see it on camera. Okay, so we want to work on the hats first. And what I like to do is start off with just a very basic tall triangle. So I'm going to start right at the very top of my canvas, and I want to come out to just to the left and right of the nose where it hits that brim. And I'm going to do that on each one. Just, it looks very pointy and very sharp. We'll add those lines, those little bits of lumps and bumps that give the fabric some movement. We'll add those, I promise. Okay, so now we need to add another little triangle at the top that points down to the right. So a long, skinny triangle that points down and to the right. There we go. And again, we can mess with that as we move along. Now, to create the shape of the hats, let's start here with the witch hat. We've got this brim that comes up probably a quarter of the way up the hat. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in. Just angle up from the left or right side up. And now I can take this hat and start giving it some shape. So if you are a little type A, may I suggest that you have a little drinky poo right now? It'll help. Okay, here we go. What I want to do is just create these subtle lumps and bumps of the fabric. So I'm following that shape, but I'm just adding a few little curves, bringing that left edge of that hat down, and then allowing the brim to have some shape as it works its way across. That's what's going to give it some character. And then as I come around on that taily section, I'm just going to, again, add a few lumps and bumps and let it fold over like that fabric is just folding over. So this looks a hot mess right now, but we're going to paint it in. So I'm not concerned about it. Not at all. Okay. Now, showing you the mummy and the ghost are both much more similar in shape. I say they look like poop emojis. So they're pretty easy to make. We don't have to worry about this little angled section on the brim. Instead, I'm just going to start at the top and create some bumps and lumps, working its way down there on the left side. And just like with the witch, put a little curve or movement on that bottom edge of the brim. And then the other side, same thing. A little bit of lump and bump. And that little tail section of the hat that's folded over there. This one I think is a little bit smoother on the edges because it's wrapped up. So it doesn't need quite as many. And you can see I'm just playing with this line as I need to. Just playing with a little bit until I get it happy. Oh, I just realized looking at the monitor that this is slanted. So if you are type A, I apologize right now. Hang on, let's see if I can fix that. Because it's going to make me nuts, so you're just going to have to deal with it. Hang on. Is that better? A little bit better. Okay, good. Sorry, I know staring at something that crooked would make me crazy if I had to look at it for an hour. So, there we go. Better. Back to the poop emoji gnome hat, shall we? So let's talk about the ghost. A little bit of water. I'm rounding out the top of this one, giving it a few lumps and bumps down to that left edge of the brim. Little curve, little movement along that bottom edge. And then that folded tip section. Bring that down. So the only real difference between the three is that the witch's hat has a little more of an angle there to create the brim. The other ones are more like a regular triangle. Okay, so we have 3 gnome noses and 3 gnome hats. We're going to come down and make the gnome bodies next. Actually, we're going to start with their beards because I think that's easier. So, first thing I'm going to do is the beards are going to start right here where the hat and the nose meet on the left and right side. And I'm just going to swoop out and down. Now I realize that there's a lot more shape here, but we can add that in as we paint it. So for right now, I'm going to get a little more paint here so I can darken that up for you. Okay. So I really just want that curve, almost like a teardrop shape. Let me add one to each one. So right where the nose and the left edge of the hat meet, I'm just going to swoop out and down. And I can add more as I need to. All right, there we go. Basic part of the hat. All we have to do is put in their little outfits and we're ready to go. So let's start with the mummy because that is the most basic shape. We can see the edge of the beard here. And because the mummy is wrapped up, its arms are tucked in tight. So we don't have to do like sleeves or anything like that. So I'm just going to come where the shoulders would be, maybe leave a little gap here about 1 inch between the hat and where I'm starting the arms. And I'm just bringing out a little curved line to look like a little bit of shoulder coming down. And that's it. At this point, you can fiddle with this and adjust it. I wouldn't recommend doing a whole lot more sketching in paint. You can always take a pencil and kind of go over the lines that you know you want. Use a light touch because we are using light colors. Some of your pencil lines might show through. But just gently nuance these lines now until you get a shape that you're happy with. Now, let's look here at our little witch gnome. To create the sleeves, I just come out with a triangle on one side and then again on the other. Put a little curve in it. You could even put a little curve at the top for the shoulder if you wanted. And then I bring the rest of the robe, come partway down the sleeve, and just bring a line down to the end of the canvas. So he looks like Gandalf the Great with his robe going out like that. All right, let's dress the ghost, shall we? All right, using that yellow. I don't want to use as much red because I got to cover it up with white. But for our ghost, we're just going to come out at an angle and down, out at an angle and down. And you can put a few little whoop-de-woos. That's technical art term for the bottom of fabric, the whoop-de-woo. We're going to add those right there. So starting partway down the beard just a little bit, and I'm curving out. And this is my triangle shape, but I got to put in the whoop-de-woos. Bringing that down to the bottom. So it looks like his little ghost outfit has some sleeves there. Whoop-de-woos. There we go. Very good. All right, so this is a really good point for you to pause and just nuance your lines. Make sure you've got them good to go. Our next step is going to be painting in the background. We're going to work light to dark. And then at that point, I recommend you take a little break and let everything dry. You can hit it with a blow dryer if you want to keep going. But know that once we get done with that background, that's going to be the best spot for you to take a break. So give yourself a minute to get your lines nuanced, and I will see you right back here. All right, we are ready to start our background. So the first thing we want to do is get some of both of our yellows. And you're going to want a little more than a nickel size little blob of each for each canvas. So I'm just going to start out. I'm going to put out a little bit more than a nickel just so I can try to make it around all three. Just squirting that out there. There's my light yellow. Let's see. Here's my dark yellow. You can see this one's a little scabbed up, so all you got to do is sort of pull that off. And boom, waste not, want not. Get some of that yellow. I don't know why I'm singing. And then a little bit of red. Probably because I like to paint to music and I'm not allowed to put music in my videos if I don't own the rights and blah, blah, blah. Creative license, intellectual property. What would I know about that as an artist, right? Okay, so I'm also going to add just a tiny bit of white. Sorry, forgot about that. Let me open that one. Bam. Little bit of white because it will help fortify that lighter yellow. Give it a little bit of oomph, you know? All right, you're going to want your big brush for this. And I am going to start off by double dipping. I'm coming over to the edge of the white and just getting a little bit there, not a lot. I'm also going to grab the same amount of yellow so you can see both of those colors on my brush. And what I'm going to do is come in and go around the edge of my outline. And I even overlap it a little bit because I want to create this glow of light to dark. So I'm going to start with this light section, little white, little yellow. And I like to do half one side of the canvas and then the other side of the canvas because I don't want this to dry before I make my way around. And I bring the yellow out about an inch, and you can adjust that to your preference and your liking. But now that that's there, I'm not going to clean my brush. Just going to come over to the edge of that darker yellow and grab some of that. And I'm lining up right next to that other section. And I'm just going to sweep where the two meet to erase that line. That's called blending. So you apply the color, and then you sweep a little bit, and that line of distinction between the two will disappear. You just want to use a light touch, and you can't really have a lot of paint in your brush when you do it. So there we go. Just bringing that out to the edge. And now I am going to rinse my brush before I go to the other side because I've got that yellow, that dark yellow in there, and I want to start with that fresh, bright yellow. So white and yellow, double dip. Work your way right around that first perimeter. Trying to make sure you can see, do a monitor check. I'm a one-woman operation here, so if you see me making weird faces over my shoulder, I'm squinting, trying to figure out what's going on. All right, there we go. Nice and easy, nice and easy. Now, for the next step, remember, we don't need to clean our brush. We can just grab some of that yellow and apply it on that outer section, and then when you don't have any paint left in your brush, bring your sweep through, because that will create the blend. It's always best to blend with no paint in your brush, or as little as possible. There we go. Little bits. Now, while this is still wet, I can come over to the red and grab the tiniest bit. And when I say tiniest bit, I ain't playing. Look at how tiny that is. Little tiny bit. And come right over to the corners and just apply that. If you need to tone it down a little bit, pick up a little more of that dark yellow. But I just like to arch a little curve there around all four corners because it builds up some depth. We go from light to medium to dark, and it gives us, you know, a little bit more of that ghoulish Halloween. There we go. A bit more here. And you can, you know, take your time with this. If you want it to get really dramatic, do it. That's the beauty about painting at home with me instead of in the studio, is you really just get to take your time and decide how to use it. You don't have to wait for, you know, 20 other people in a room to finish or try to keep up with them. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to do the next two. You can hang out or you can pause and skip ahead. I'll try to make it quick. Little yellow, little white in case you missed it. All the way around on one side. Stand close to the edge. Overlap that edge. It's totally okay. All right. Then some of that yellow. That darker yellow all the way to the edge. Sweep that through. And it's okay if it's streaky. Streaky is good. Streaky is good. We like streaky. And just sweep and blend it in. Let's go over and get that other side. White and yellow around the perimeter. And overlapping if you need to. Once you work your way around one side, grab some of that darker yellow, take that to the edge of your paper or your canvas. This is the beauty about having your studio. You can see I'm painting my wall here. That's okay. It's been painted before. It will be painted again. I'll just have to paint it before I move or sell the house. Okay. There we go. And don't forget, little tiny bit of red to the corners. I do find that when I'm adding that red, I take just the tiniest amount and pick up a little bit of that darker yellow and use that to swoop around. You can give it a nice curve so you get an oval framing. You can really, you know, just sort of arrange this however you like it. All right. So now's a good time to pause and give these a moment to start drying. We want to come back when our background is dry. So you can always take a blow dryer to it. Just hit it with a blow dryer and that will take care of any wet spots. Or, you know, go take the dogs for a walk or start dinner. Live your life. Do whatever it is you got to do. I'll be here when you get back, okay? So I'm going to finish this guy up. And the third verse, same as 1 and 2. And I'll meet you right back here when you're ready. Let those dry and come back to me, okay? Have a drink for me, please. Okay, bye. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you had a good break. Your painting is dry and we're ready to go. So for the next steps, regardless of which gnome you're doing, we're going to need some white and some black. Obviously, the number or the orders are going to be sort of reversed. So for the ghost gnome, get about a quarter a size amount of white. And if you're doing the witch or the mummy gnome, you're going to want about a quarter size amount of black. So the mummy, words are hard. For the mummy, you're going to need equal parts of black and white. But again, we can always go back and get more. You can't put it back in that little sauce packet. So let's grab some black and white. I'm going to clean off my brush. And the first thing I'm going to do is start with the base layer of the hat. So on the ghost, that's going to be white. On the witch, it's going to be black. And on the mummy, it's going to be black. So let me start over here on the ghost. So regardless of which one you're working on, get your base color and come on in. I'm going over the edge of my background a little bit. I like to trace around the edges first. By the way, I'm using my bigger brush and just that white paint and working my way around, getting right up over that background. You don't want too thick of a coat. It's much easier to put on a thin coat and to come back over it with more paint. So you can still see some of my sketch lines through that first layer of white. I don't care. I'm going to let dry. And then I'm going to come in and mess with it some more. But I'm going to let that dry. I'm also going to paint the outfit section. So a little bit of white here. And again, go right over the edge of your background. Don't leave a gap. Getting right up to that edge of the beard. With the white, it's usually pretty important to put 2 layers on. So keep that in mind. Okay. There we go. I'm going to let that dry. And while I do, I'm going to come in and do my witch. Okay. I rinse that white out because I don't want a bunch of gray. Grabbing some black. Same thing. Getting right up to that edge. Following along that line. And outlining it almost first. Just going right along those edges. I do end up cutting off the top of the nose. That's okay. And fill it in. You can take as long as you need to. You can always hit the pause button and take your time. I like to put a little bit of curve and movement in their hats. A few lumps and bumps to give them some shape. And with the black, you really should only need 1 good solid layer. But if you want to let it dry and come back and hit it again, by all means, do it. Take your time. Do what makes you happy. All right, that's good enough for that hat. It's on. Now I'm going to get it dressed. Come down here to my gnome. And again, outlining the edge of the fabric of that outfit right there, the edge of the beard, and just fill it in. And when I pull that brush, it just moves like I'm spreading butter on toast. It should just glide. That's what we want. Just let it glide. Outline, fill in. Yes, I'm fast. I'm supposed to be faster than you. I am a professional. So you should not be moving at the same speed I am. Take your time. I've got 3 to paint. So I'll move a little quicker. And my mummy, same as my witch. I'm going to come in and do the hat first. Outline the edge. And then fill it in. Same thing for the outfit. Give me a moment to get there. Whoops. Okay. Almost there. Now, the more you mess with the edge, the funkier things get. I learned that lesson the hard way at least once in a painting. So don't mess with it if you don't have to. That's good enough. And then the little mummy arms are all bound in. So this part's super easy. Just outline it and fill it in. Stop messing with it. He's just going to get fatter and fatter, and I can't put him on a diet. All right. And the other side is done. So there we go. One layer of white on the ghost, and then a simple layer of black on each for the witch and the mummy. All right, so we're back. Hopefully you had a good break. And let's just sort of recap where we're at. We have our background done. We've got our initial coats of black. I went ahead and added a second coat of white to my ghost. So if you're working on your ghost, go ahead and start that now. I'm going to come over and talk about the witch for a minute. What I want to do is I'm going to bring you a little bit closer here. So you can see there's some shading and highlight here on the left side of that hat, and that just gives the fabric a little bit more dimension. So for that, I want to use my large brush. And I'm going to take a little tiny bit of white, just about a pea-sized amount, and move it over. And I'm also going to grab a little bit of black, a little less than a pea-sized amount. And I'm going to end up with sort of a medium tone gray. And what I want to do is first, I'm going to establish where the brim of the hat is. So I start at the left corner and just sort of follow up and bring that across and down the other side. Now, I'm also going to add a little bit up here on the left side. And I'm running out of paint. So all I'm doing is just sort of wisping. You can grab a little bit more black to help blend it if you need to. We don't need it to be like a stripe. It's just a gentle little hit of light. And we don't have to get too particular about it. The whole idea is to just create little bits of highlight or shading. I think that might be a little hard to see on the camera for you now, but when we come in and add that yellow or green over it, it'll really start to pop. I also just like to bring a little bit down. Whoops, there we go. Did you see what I did? I totally brought that shoulder all the way out too far. That's okay, I just made the shoulder a little bigger. Nobody has to know. It's our secret. But we can add a little bit of highlight, just a few little strokes. They don't have to be very specific. The whole goal is to just create little ripples in the fabric. Let's talk about the mummy. We're going to let that set and dry. So my ghost friends, you're working on your second coat, on your hat and your body. My witch friends, you're just adding little subtle bits of highlight here along the brim and pretty much the left side of the hat and body, but we can add a little bit just to give some shape and form. And now for my mummy friends, I'm going to clean my brush out. This is the fun part. We get to bandage up our gnome. And it may take 2 coats, but we'll see. First thing I'm going to do is clean out my big brush and grab some white. And I like to start at the curved part of the hat here. I can see some of my paint is still a little bit wet. I'm just going to go for it. I might get a little gray in here. That's all right, because I'll put a second coat. When that happens, I just try to sweep off my brush so I don't continue to spread it. But I've angled a line of white there like a bandage. And then starting where it ended, I'm going back the opposite direction, leaving a little gap. And you can make those wider. The wider you make them, the fewer you have to do, by the way. Little tip from the professional there. And I'm just going to keep zigzagging and adding in my bandages here. And you can never wrap a mummy the same way twice. So you always end up with a few subtle differences, but that's what makes him unique. He's a couture Halloween mummy. So you can see little tiny bits of space there, like we're rolling the bandage around him. All right. So, little side story that has nothing to do with the gnomes. But when I was a kid, my mother went to nursing school and she would practice wrapping me up. I got to be a mummy for one Halloween because she was in nursing school and it was the easiest solution. She didn't have time to worry about my costume. So she wrapped me up in gauze and I was a mummy. She used to practice putting casts on me, all sorts of stuff. I drew the line at shots though, she tried. Okay, and I'm going to do one more line here right across the bottom. There we go. Now, they're a little flimsy and a little messy, and I'm okay with that because we'll come back over and add a second layer of that white before we're all done with it. I'm going to grab a little more white here. I just try to take a little bit as I need it because it's really hard to try to squeeze all that back in the little tube. All right. Now we're coming down to the body. Same thing. I'm just going to angle across and out. One to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. And I just do one side because no one's going to know if they line up on the other side. It's just a little easier. And you don't have to worry about those edges being super clean because it's a mummy. It's, been a sarcophagus for many, many years or whatever those things are called. And, it's getting a little rough around the edges. Remember, you can cross over the beard. That's okay. We're going to paint it in. But just get your bandages, angle them so that they're going different directions like shoelaces. Just like a shoelace. There we go. All right, so let's take a quick review. Second coat of white over on our ghost. That should already be done. I'm going to hit mine with just a little bit more because I use that really dark tone of orange to sketch in, and you can still see a lot of those lines. So I'm just going to go over that a little bit more real quickly. But this is where we should be at. We should have a little bit of gray highlighting along the left edge of our hat and our brim here on our witch gnome. Even a little bit of that gray on the clothing. Our ghost gnome should just be white as it is here. And then our mummy gnome should be wrapped up with one layer. So let's start adding the beards and then we'll come back in and start working on all that detail. So for the beards, I like to use this smaller brush. I have sent you in the kit these 1/4 inch flat brushes because you can get really skinny lines with them if you use that side edge. And this side makes great beard curls. The other thing about this brush is you can bring it down and twist it. You can bring it down flat and then rotate the handle and it'll give you a pointy end. So let me show you what I'm talking about. First thing I'm going to do is take some white, about 2 blobs of white. And then I'm going to take a tiny blob, very, very little, proportionately. See that tiny bit of black? It's going in all that white. I don't want this gray to be super dark. I want it to be on the lighter side. And I leave a little bit of a swirl in there so that magic happens when I get to the canvas. Little bit of water in your paint. So I just dip my brush in the water and work a little bit of that into the edge of the paint. And that's going to help it glide a little bit more smoothly. So I find that it's easiest to begin with these long strokes that go down the center. We're going to take that gray and start building up our beard. Now, I'm not filling this in entirely. There are little gaps of space, and these strokes start at the nose and curve out to the left or to the right, depending on what side they're on, and then I just streak down. leaving little bits of naked canvas showing there. We're going to come through with some white, so I don't need to flood that area. And now I've got this basic part, the body of the beard, but I need to build up the exciting part. So let's start at the top left corner of the nose, and we're going to curve out and just bring these little curvy lines. If you're a little nervous about these lines, practice them on the butcher paper that your table is covered with, or even here on your paper plate. Just take a moment and practice them before you get to your canvas. You'll be glad you did. I like to just bring a few out and give them a little wisp on the end. And the way I do that is I start with the brush flat and I'm pulling that wide stroke, and then I rotate it and let that skinny edge come out. Remember, we don't have to fill that all in. I just want a little base of that gray there. And I'll even use that wispy stroke down here. Put some texture and movement in that beard. We'll come around to the other side. So regardless of which gnome you're doing, whether it's the ghost, the mummy, or the witch, now we're adding in this gray part of our beard. Take your time. I'm going to keep working on the other guys. You're going to hear me repeat myself a lot, but that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes the important stuff bears repeating. But that's what we want it to look like. We get that basic shape in, and we'll leave that be. We'll come back and add some white to it in just a minute, but take your time. And if you finish before I'm done with the other two, you can just scoot ahead to the next section. All right, so again, I'm just going to start here at the base and pull down. Strokes like parentheses. And I'm not getting perfect coverage. That's okay. This is the undercoat. This is what's going to give it some depth. When we start adding that white in, it's going to give it some shape and some depth. Sort of like a polar bear, right? Polar bears have clear fur and black skin, and they look white. Okay. So now we're going to come up and start building out and pulling down, just giving it a funky shape. It really does just look like a mop. Now, the more you mess with these little curly bits that we're making, the bigger things are going to get. So if you have any that are giving you trouble, leave them alone. We'll bring a little white over them later, and that might help solve your problem. But trying to correct a problem with a painting is never a good idea. That's when we get frustrated and we try to overcompensate and things just get big and out of hand. It's like when you're mad at a friend or one of your kids or one of your siblings. Sometimes you just got to walk away. You got to get a little space and distance, take a moment, get level-headed, and come back at it in a minute. We can do that with paintings. All right, one more to get the gray on here. Again, a little bit of water in your paint is very helpful. You don't want so much water that things get drippy, but you want it to move just nice and smoothly. It should glide. There we go. I love the sound of a paintbrush on canvas. Can you hear the little scratchy sounds it makes? Now, at this point, what you want to be doing is looking at your gnome and making sure that the shape of your beard is the way that you want it. Is the shape of your hat the way you want it? We're starting to reach the point where we're going to start working on nitty-gritty details, and we're not going to be able to go back in and fix things like shapes. We'll be able to add detail, but we're not going to go back and do any major reconstruction. So if you want to do that, now is the time. Take a look at it. It's the beauty about painting at home, right? You don't have to keep up with anybody else in the room but yourself. You can put me on pause. I'll still be here. But the whole goal is to make sure that you're happy with it at this point. No, it isn't finished. If you've ever done a remodel or construction, we've got floors, we've got counters and cabinets, but they haven't done finished work yet. Finished work is what makes it we're going to start our finish work. So we've got the gray of our beards in and the basic parts of our outfits in. I'm going to rinse off this small brush and start adding white to the beard. So if you're not quite there yet, go ahead and pause. Just come back when you're ready. But I'm going to go ahead and get going and show you what's next with those beards. So small brush is clean and dry. I've got some white paint here. And I'm using some water. Now my water is like a really nasty, ugly gray. It's kind of swampy, but it's not going to matter. So with the white, I want to start and pull out. I'm not going to make every little individual section of this beard, but we're going to create strokes that go in the general direction of the way that the beard grows. And that's what makes it look cool. So as I come out around the beard, around the nose, I like to curve up and out. When I switch directions down below the center, I'm going to start curving to the right. And I'm just letting some of that gray show in between. I'm going over some of that gray, letting some of it show. And just pulling these strands. It should look like a rag mop, like a string mop. And what I try to do is just use very rapid, little curvy strokes and let those beard locks just overlap. But the more we mess with it, the more everything's going to become one color. So if it doesn't get quite bright and white, once we get through this white layer, we'll work on some of the details of our costumes and we can come back and brighten those up. So we're just adding in the white of the beard, just the way we did the gray. Individual strokes, just go in the direction that we want that beard to go. Don't get too fussy with it. You don't want to paint it in solid. And keep this in mind, when you're standing this close, everything gets a little bit freaky. It's like using the scary side of the mirror when you tweeze your lip and your eyebrow. Well, I don't tweeze my lip anymore because of masks, as you can see, but I do still tweeze my eyebrows occasionally. But that scary side of the mirror, that totally screws up your perspective in your vision. So you've got to stand up and step back, put a little distance between yourself and the piece. And when you can't see every single line and every single brushstroke, a good 10 or 12 feet away, then you're in business. That's when you'll be able to adequately judge what's going on. But when you look up close, everything is scary. All right. Now, this isn't as bright or as light as I would like it to be. But I know that wet paint is like a tired toddler at Target. It's a hassle. So I'm going to leave that and let it dry. I'm going to come over and work on my other gnomes. If you don't have another gnome to work on, hit it with the blow dryer, take a quick break. But I'm going to keep adding the white to my beards, and I'll be back when I've got those other two done. So actually, if you're still working on your beard, you can hang out. If you're done, go ahead and pause me. I just want to show you one more. Remember, long strokes, we're overlapping. And I'm doing these a little further apart so that you can see how they just start curving and going out, and we start to see sort of that shaggy mop look. That's what we're going for. So go ahead and pause, and I'll be right back here when you're done with your beards. Let me finish mine up, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so our beards are in. We've got that first undercoat of gray, and then we put a coat of white over that using those long overlapping individual strokes. So we're going to let those beards rest for a minute. If you are working on the mummy, now is a really good time to get your big brush, give it a rinse, and take some white and go over some of, or all, whatever. They don't need to be perfectly white. We want different tones of gray in them. A little shadow from underneath. But just go over them a little bit with a little bit more white. If you are working on your ghost, now is a really good time to make sure that all your white areas are good. So if you have any little outlining that's still showing up, now's a good time to just hit that with a little bit extra white as well. So this is what we're working on, tidying up the white sections of the gnome, of the ghost. That's a ghost, words are hard. We're brightening up the bandages of our mummy. And let me talk to my folks over here that are working on the witch. We want to put in our little buckle here. And I've got just a tiny bit of yellow left on my palette, and I'm grabbing just a little bit of green. I don't need a lot. About the size of a dime. We're just going to need it for the nose and this little part of the hat. Oh, I thought I had yellow left. Whoops. Hot mess Mel. All right, little bright yellow, that light yellow, and a little bit of green. And I'm just going to grab a tiny dab of the yellow and a tiny dab of the green and mix those together. Maybe add just a little bit of white to that. And play with this color, but I'm going for sort of a limey green. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a ribbon going across like the band of that hat. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint that in. Edge to edge. That's all we need. Don't want to get too fussy with it. And then I'm also going to paint in the nose. I'm using that same color. Let's get a little bit of water in there so that I can move that. There we go. Now, I got a little funky here with the edge of my hat. I'm going to clean the edge of that hat up and bring it over the top of that nose. So I'm not going to mess with it. But I've got that limey green, and then I'm just going to, without cleaning my brush, grab a little of that dark green. And I want to show you what I did. Do you see how there's only dark green on one side of that flat edge? I'm going to line that side up with the outer edge here and pull around and create a little bit of darkness on that outside section of the nose. And then without grabbing any more paint, I'm just blending so that the darker shadows are around that outer perimeter. So my witch friends, you've got your band and your nose going. Now, my other friends over here, let me show you how to make, how to start building up a flesh tone. And you can adjust this however you need to. But I like to take a little bit of yellow, just a tiny bit, and a little bit of red. And we're going to start with it like a basic orange. Ooh, there's a lot of red there. Get a little more yellow. There we go. And from there, you can just start adding little bits of white until you start to get sort of a peachy tone, a coral. Now, if you want to go and make your gnome be a gnome of color, you can grab just a tiny shade of black, just a tiny little speck, and start adding that and swirling around, and it'll take you sort of to a brown, sort of a khaki tone. It's really hard to get flesh tone out of this, but we can get kind of close. So I'm going to use this darker one over here on my little ghost gnome. Paint around that outer edge. Fill it in. Remember, we're not caring about the bottom brim of the hat because we're going to go over that section. But instead of creating shadow around the edge, I'm going to grab a little white and start swirling that from the inside out and leaving the brightest section right in the center. I'll show you that again over here. And again, I can show you a little yellow, tiny bit of red, and some white. And every time you do, you end up with a slightly different tone, skin tone. And it's a gnome. It's a make-believe creature. You can make its skin whatever color you want it to be. Okay. Go right around and get this guy's nose. Now again, with this color, I'm filling the whole thing in, going to wipe off my brush, and then put a tiny bit of white in the center and swirl out to create the bright spot in the middle. So fiddle with your noses. Remember, the more you go around the edge of that nose, the bigger it's going to get, and it's going to be really hard to make smaller. So go easy with it. I'm just going to clean up the very edge here of my witch's nose because it got a little bit funky. I'm working on this canvas paper, which is a great resource, but paint doesn't move across it quite the same way that it did on my canvas. There we go. Now, let's see, what other little fiddly bits do we need? My witch needs a wart, so let's get a tiny bit of black and add that little, I just make a little dot for the wart on the nose. Pick a spot and make one. Now, my friends that are working on the mummies, let me show you a little trick. I want you to take your larger brush, get it clean and dry. Make sure those bristles are nice and reformed so that they're nice and flat. And I want you to come over to the very edge of your black and just get the tiniest bit. Let's see if I can show that to you better. Hang on a second. We'll use this clean paper plate. You can barely see the black on the tip of that. What we're going to do is create these little shadows on the edges. So line it up and pull. Just a quick little pull from each edge. You don't need a lot of paint, just a little bit will do, and a very light touch. And it should be irregular. I mean, these are, who knows how old these bandages are, how long this mummy has been waiting to be released. So his bandages are quite a mess. And I get a little bit down here on the body as well. Just little bits coming in from the edge. So, witches, you're working on your nose and your hat. Mummy friends, you're adding little bits of black that we just pull in from that outer edge. Now, if you got like super carried away and a bunch of black came off your brush, let it dry. Don't try to put white over it. It's just going to turn every shade of gray you can imagine. Hit it with a blow dryer, let it dry, and then come back and try the black trick again. The other thing you're going to want to do is you can use the skinny edge of your brush and come across and separate where any bandages overlap. You don't have to do that for all of them. I just put in a few little dividing lines where I might need them. So that's what you're working on with your mummy. Okay, witch or ghost friends, here we go. You're going to want your small brush, clean and dry, and some black paint. And we are going to work on our ghost hat. So the first thing I'm going to do is just use a little bit of black paint and put in 2 ovals. And I make them about the size of olives. But make them fit in your space. You can make them oversized, you can make them tiny. All of those things will give character to the piece. So that's the first thing we're doing. And then I just make a squiggly line for my ghost mouth. So a couple of ovals and a squiggly line. We are getting down to the nitty-gritty details. Remember, pause at any time if you need to. Take your time. All right, I got to give this witch a little bit of a buckle on her hat. So I'm going to take just a little bit of white and yellow. I'm using that light yellow, and I'm just painting a square in over that band. Just a little square, open in the center. And if you want, you can even get a little fancy with it. Put little hits of white to highlight it, but just a little square so that it looks like it's a bit of a buckle. And then while I have that yellow on my brush, I wipe most of it off But then I just take little bits of yellow. This is called dry brush. And I'm just barely tickling around the edge where I put that gray and just letting a little bit of this very dry yellow. I was just almost having to scrub. Don't get more paint. You want very little paint. But now we're really starting to see that little highlight there. It's called a dry brush. You use as little paint as possible and just sort of scratch. Oh, that was too much paint. I flipped the brush over. Careful. Wipe it off with your finger. That's what I do. All right, so now is a great time to pause and let everyone in the group get caught up. We want to be all done with our noses, with our ghost hat, with our witch hat, and with our mummy outfits. So go ahead and pause, and when you're ready, we're going to come back and brighten up our beards a little bit with some fresh white and do some outlining, and these guys will be ready to hang in your house. All right, last couple of steps for this. We are only going to need our small brush. I'm going to get a little bit of fresh white, and I'm going to use the little bit of black that I have left. So with my clean small brush and some fresh white, I'm just going to come in and create a few little bright streaks of white in my beard. And these are single strokes. I'm not really going to go over them again. You may see paint pile up just a little bit with like a little bit of texture to it. That's okay. It'll dry flat. But just a few little bright white spots. Especially if things got really flat and gray in your beard. Just a few quick hits of white. Don't have to mess with it a lot. It's like your highlighter. If you put too much on, you're going to glow and look like an alien. So, little bits, little bits, little bits. There we go. All right. Now, I would encourage you to take your time with this, but I don't want you to spend too much time on it. It's better to come back after it's dried a couple hours and take a look at it and see what you need to do. But really, we just wanted to add a few bright hits of white to that beard to just give it a little pop. All right, last step is going to be outlining. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things. I'm looking around here as I'm moving around. I have a black marker. I'm looking for a Sharpie. So I'm going to outline in a couple of different ways so that you can see. I'm just using black paint and the small brush. We can use that skinny edge. But if you're worried about the outlining, don't try it with a small brush. Get yourself a Sharpie or a regular black marker. Either one will work. The key, though, if you're going to use a marker, is that you have to make sure your painting is absolutely, completely dry before you take the marker to it. Because the minute you get wet paint on the felt tip of a marker, it's gone. It's trash. It will never make another protest poster as long as you live. So take good care of your markers. Let the paintings dry. But let me show you how you can use a marker instead of a paintbrush. We'd use both the same way, but I'm just going to give you a quick little show. I'm just going to take my marker and go right around and outline the edge here. And I'm not even outlining it perfectly. It doesn't need to be outlined perfectly. I'm going to bring just a little line in there so that it looks like the fabric folded over, but just an outline. So I've outlined the hat, and now I'm going to come and outline the body. And I'm doing it either outside or over the white section so that you can tell it's intentionally imperfect. I don't want to make myself crazy. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, do you, boo. Just get in there and get them all nice and clean and tight. If that makes you happy, that's your process, do it. But I like to do things sloppy on purpose so that people don't think I'm trying too hard. Okay, so I have outlined the hat and the body. And what I'm going to do is just come around and gently outline parts of the beard. I'm not going to outline the whole thing. I'm just sort of creating little sections here. Little irregular lines going around and outlining that beard just to make it a little fun and a little funky. Now, if this were dry and I could, well, it might be dry enough. You can come in and add in a few lines, but don't get carried away. Just a few little curved sections indicating, you know, some dimension in your beard. And I got some paint on my felt tip. Try to get that off right away, save it. Okay, so that's how you can use a Sharpie or a marker to outline. Let me show you how to do it with some paint and your small brush. First thing is you want to start off with a clean small brush. And then I like to take a little water and work it into my black paint. Our black paint is probably the consistency of pudding, and you really want it to be more like heavy cream or half and half. And then scrape your brush off the edge of your plate. You don't want a bunch in your bristles. And I've got a bunch dripping down my handle, so let's dry that off. Now, look at my brush. I've got a wide edge and a skinny edge. I want to use the skinny edge to outline. So I'm going to hold my brush like a pencil. And here, all I need to do is just create the little outlines around the beard. So I'm just coming in and creating a few little outlines of these wispy parts of the beard. Don't even really need to outline the whole thing. Remember, if we make it imperfect on purpose, it's whimsical. And then just a few little lines in the beard. Again, just to give it a little bit of shape and a little bit of form. And then finally, last but not least, our little mummy. Again, just outlining the edges. Little wispy sort of triangle shapes here. And then a few little lines. Whoops, that one got a little big. Remember, if you end up with something you don't like, give it a minute, let it dry, and then go in and cover it up. All right. There you go. Now, I could sit here and tweak these guys for a little bit. You know, sometimes the hardest part in painting is knowing when to stop. And I'm one of those people, I'll keep working on them. But that's the beauty about painting at home, is now you have all the time in the world to work on your piece. So take your time with it. Come in, rewind, take a break, do whatever it is you need to do. One of my tricks is I like to hang these on the wall where I plan on displaying them in the home. And then I leave them there for like a day or two and walk by and look at them, stand there, oh, maybe a little of this, maybe a little of that. And then take another whack at it. Pour yourself a glass of wine, sit down, watch some Law and Order, and go in and tweak a few things. Maybe you tried outlining with your paintbrush and you're going to stare at it and be like, nah, that ain't no good, bro. So go get yourself a Sharpie and come back and take a whack at it in another day. You know, it's not a race, it's a process. And as long as the process is fun, the art's going to take care of itself. So give yourself some credit. I'm going to let these guys dry and maybe come back and take another look at them. Make sure that you sign your piece. My favorite way to sign my piece is with a Sharpie, or I like to actually paint the pad of my thumb and press it so that it's going to take the FBI or a fingerprint expert to come in and authenticate one of my pieces. I'm a little extra like that. So there you go. They're done. Enjoy them. And let's do some more for Christmas. What do you think? I'll get some together. It was a pleasure to paint with you. I hope that you had a good time. Go check me out on social media platforms. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow all of the links that are going to be here at the end of the video. To clean up your brushes, just wash them out with some mild soap and water and dry them. Let them dry. Your paint packets, if they have paint left in them, I throw mine in a Tupperware or an old takeout container. Put the lid on it, stick it in the back of the fridge, and then I can come back. I've got one in the fridge that I've been using for about a month now. So don't let those go to waste. I remember days when I had to spend a lot of money to look for paint. So save it. Don't waste it. All right. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. All right, you guys. It was great to paint with you. Take care of yourselves. And I can't wait to see you again. All right. Be well.